Hey everybody, Tom from How to Wrangler. I recently did a how-to video on how to change your rear brake pads and rotors. After I did that, I realized that one of my rotors was actually seized, so I'm changing out the rear rotors right now. So I've already got everything taken apart here. I'm going to put a link below here so that you can see the other video and see how to get to this point, how to take everything apart. Now, I've got the old caliper resting up here because it's still connected to the brake line, and the old bracket here has the new brake pads that I just put in. So we're going to take those out of there and put everything into the brand new caliper here. And I'm also going to put in a brand new brake line right here because this one is, original, so it's always a good idea to change this out. It's worth it while you're going through this process. So let's dive right in to the first step. Before you even get started, you're going to want to take the brake lines and bring them inside. If it's cold out or if it's too hot out, bring them inside to room temperature and let them sit for half an hour, laying out straight, and then pull them kind of straight at the end just to make sure that you've got them loosened up for the install. Okay, so do that before you even get started on anything else, and we'll jump into the actual brakes right now. Okay, now because we're removing both the caliper and the brake line, I'm going to use a clear plastic cup here just to catch the brake fluid that's going to pour out once I disconnect the brake hose. So you're going to want to, I'm just using an adjustable wrench here just because you've got to get in here just like this, and I'm going to loosen this up. It's going to start to drip a little bit of brake fluid. I'm just disconnecting it from here because my caliper is old and rusted. You could disconnect the hose from the caliper itself over here first if you wanted, but like I said, mine's old and rusted, and I'm replacing the brake line anyway, so might as well do it from right here. You'll start to see a little bit of the brake fluid come out on the nut itself. Eventually, there we go. Okay, now that's loose right there. So next step, I'm going to take off this bolt right here, which is what's holding the line in place. Okay, so you need a 10mm wrench to remove this nut that's holding the old line in place. Okay. Right, at this point, I'm going to move my cup under there. I'm going to take out the old caliper and watch where the drip comes down. Now, I already did my other side, so it's not dripping anywhere near as much as it did when I did the other side because a lot of the brake fluid's already been processed through the lines here. So, all right. Okay, so the next step, I've taken the bracket apart from the caliper, and I'm going to put in these little clips that are going to be to hold the brake pads. So the clips have a high side and a low side, and you match that up on the actual bracket with the high side and the low side here. And then there's also a little clip that extends out off the clip. You want that towards the outside, so that's not going to be interfering with the rotor. So just like that, I'm going to pop all four in. So when you're done, you should see that the inside is flush like that, and the outside has that clip hanging off the edge. Okay, so the next step after I got all those clips in is to take out my brake pads, which are still good because I just put these in the other day. I'm going to put these in the new bracket. So what you want to do is where's my grease here? You're going to want to put a little bit of grease on the metal contact points. So right here and right here. This way, as the brake pads are sliding in and out, you're going to avoid any squeaks. There we go. All right, just kind of fill it around with them until you get them in there. And then pop out the other pad. Do the same thing, we'll put some grease on either end here. And then pop it in. Like that. All right, so now we've got our brake pads back in place, and we're going to continue to the next step. Okay, so our next step here is to put the bracket that we just put the brake pads back in, back into place here. I'm going to reuse the 18mm bolts and start with the top one. Makes it a lot easier, it just holds it in place. Then you can move to the bottom one. It's a little difficult to see back here, so you go by feel. Okay. There we go. And then once you get them started, you can finish them down with your ratchet and tighten those guys down. All right. So we're going to take our brake line that's all ready. It's been sitting inside for over half an hour. Keep in mind there's a different brake line for each side. Looking at the way that the flange comes out here and how it's going to hook in, just make sure you've got the right one before you connect this all together. So you're going to have your caliper here, and there is a bolt on the back. It's got a hole in it and it's hollow. Okay, this is how we're going to connect the brake line. Now what's very important here is the brake line is going to come with 2 copper washers, which I'm going to take out right now. And you have to have one on the inside and then one on the outside of your connection here. I'm going to show you how that works. Okay. So I'm going to put one washer on the inside, like that, okay? And then I'm going to, so the brake hose is going to connect like this. You can see that angle, how it's coming up off the back, okay? So I'm going to put the washer, then screw, and then on the inside here, the other washer. And then I'm gonna hand tighten this down. As somebody pulls in next door. Okay. So there we go. So now we got a washer sandwich on either side, and you're all connected. And let's move on to the next step. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention too is you got a 15 millimeter bolt there. So I'm going to tighten this down a little bit more here just to make sure it's extra secure as we hook this up for the next step. Okay, so the next step is we're going to put some grease on the brake pads where the caliper is going to make contact. Again, just trying to avoid any squeaking. And then we're going to slide the caliper in place and push the push pins in. Like that. And we're going to grab the bolts that came with the new caliper and have this in place here before we tighten them down. Now to tighten these down, you're going to need a 13 millimeter socket and a 15 millimeter straight wrench that's a little bit narrow so you can fit it in here, because you got to hold this nut in place while you turn the bolt on the outside to tighten them down. So I'm going to do like this. Okay. Now I'm hand tightening these down, but you should torque these down. Make sure that everything is nice and tight. I believe these get torqued down to only something like 26 pounds, but there we go. All right, next step. Now that we've got the main brake assembly put back together, we have to reconnect the brake line. All right, so what I like to do is to actually run it behind here, and I like to hold this in place first, just loosely with this 10 millimeter bolt, and then make sure we're lined up here, use the adjustable wrench, and tighten this down. Okay, so I'm going to tighten this down, and I'm going to tighten that back down, and then we're going to go back and we're going to bleed the brakes and refill the brake fluid, and then we're pretty much done. All right, so our next step is to come to the master cylinder here. I recommend wiping it off. You don't want to get any dirt or debris in there before you open it up. So I'm going to open this up here, and we're going to use .3 brake fluid, and we're going to fill this up. Now, you really want to be careful with the brake fluid because it's very corrosive. So if you have a funnel, I recommend using it. Otherwise, be very careful. Or you can use a soda bottle that you can cut the top off of. I'm just going to be very careful here and not spill any anywhere. All right, and that's filled right up to the top. So now we're going to have to go back and bleed our brakes. Get that cap right back on there. So what we're going to do is the master cylinder is right here in front of the driver's side door. And I'm sorry, right in front of the driver's side. So we want to go to the wheel furthest away, which is the back passenger wheel. So we're going to bleed from there. Then we're going to do the back driver's side, the front passenger side, and the front driver's side. That way we get the fluid going all the way through, clean out the system and get pressure back on our brakes. So I'm going to be using this one-man brake bleed kit, which is available on Amazon for like $7. I put a link below. If you guys click on that, it helps me out. And you know, this is the exact one that you want to use. It's very convenient because it has a magnet here, so you can actually stick it to the Jeep up above, because when you're bleeding the brakes, you want it to bleed up high. You want the gravity to lift it up. And then also it has this little tip on the end here that allows you to insert it into the brake bleed, so you don't have to try to put a piece of plastic around it. It makes it a lot easier to use. Okay, so I'm going to show you what this looks like from underneath on the back. And like I said, I already did the one on the back passenger side, so I'm going to be starting on this one, but you're going to start on the back passenger side and then work your way around the Jeep. Okay, let's dive in. All right, so on top of your caliper, there's a little rubber grommet that covers up the brake bleeder. Take that off. Now, different calipers have different size bleeders. My back ones are 10 millimeter and my front are 11. So what I'm going to do, I've got my one-man brake bleeder kit. So this magnet holds the bottle up high, right? Because you need to have it above where you're bleeding the brake. So what I'm going to do is put my wrench on here, okay? Which I'll go this way, like so. And then I'm going to insert the needle nose into the brake line there, okay? And then I'm going to loosen. I'm going to go 1 or 2 turns. You should start to see a little bit of the brake fluid come out, like that. And you see there's a couple of bubbles in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this wrench on here, leave this all hooked up, and I'm going to go pump the brakes 3 times. Okay, now I can still see there's a couple air bubbles here, so I'm going to go pump it 3 more times until I've got a clear line of fluid coming out. We're going to get all the air out. Okay, now that looks good. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to tighten up this bolt. Okay, now if that happens, I'm going to put it back in because you don't want to make sure there's no air. That was obviously a mistake, but I'm glad it happened so you guys can see what we do here. So you're going to put it back in, and I'm going to go pump it 1 more time, 2 more times, just to make sure we got no air bubbles in there. Okay, that looks good. So I'm going to tighten this up while the hose is still attached. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to hold this hose up so we don't spill the brake fluid everywhere. And then you can let it drip down into the bottle. And then we're going to dispose of this into our bigger bottle, which we're gathering it all together. Okay? Okay, now that I've bled every brake, I'm back at the master cylinder, and I'm going to just top off the brake fluid since we took some out there. All right. Cap right back on there. You want to get any contaminants in there, And then I'm just gonna go pump the brakes until they're nice and hard, and then we're good to go. All right, guys, I'm shooting this from my office because the last step I forgot to mention when I was outside is once you've bled all the air out of the brakes, the final step that you need to do, you can either do it with somebody else, or if you have a piece of wood, or I actually used a windshield cleaner, something that you can jam between your seat and the brake pedal, because you need to pump the brakes 3 times with the bleeder on there, and then hold it down in the last time, and then close off the bleeder valve, because that's going to increase the pressure. And you do this again starting on the passenger side rear, then driver side rear, passenger front, driver front. Once you've done all of that, then your brakes are going to be nice and tight. If you don't do that, there's a chance that you could still have a little bit of air in your lines, and you're going to get really soft, spongy brakes, which are not good. So either way, once you've done this, go very slow the first time and just test to make sure that you've got that pressure back in your brakes. If you don't feel like it's all the way, go back and bleed again. And like I said, again, 3 pumps and then hold and then tighten off. So if you're doing it by yourself, do 3 pumps, jam a piece of wood, or like I did, the windshield scraper in there, and hold that foot pedal all the way down, the brake, and then go down underneath and tighten off, and then you can release everything and take the brake back off. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There's going to be another video coming up soon for me, so keep a lookout for that, and if you haven't already, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.